Photosensitivity warning, viewer discretion is advised. After the success of Street Fighter II: The World Warriors, Capcom made a follow-up release updating the game to Champion Edition. In it, they rebalanced and made the 4 bosses of the game playable, that being Balrog, Vega, Sagat, and M. Bison. Though ultimately a simple update, for the early 90s, this was a huge upgrade to the game, and I'm sure a surprise to many people too. Finally, you got to play the bosses yourself, and who doesn't want to play the villains in a video game? This would pave the way for the 4 kings to become fan favorites to this day. I don't think I could properly break down the impact this simple decision had on the fighting game genre, if any, but I'm happy with the choice. Granted, you can't always play bosses in every fighting game, for better or worse. When you can play the bosses though, even if they aren't good, well, who cares? You get to play the villain. One of the things you'll immediately know about my fighting game taste is that I love SVC Chaos, and one such reason is the whopping 12 bosses you get to play in that game, all of whom are playing their own game in a game where everyone's playing their own game, adding so much variety. You'll also quickly learn that I love SNK and especially King of Fighters, but unfortunately, you don't really get to play most bosses in these games, and this sucks for one simple reason. The KOF series is known for its massive variety of characters, both in terms of style and gameplay. The bosses are no exception, as each game increasingly raises the stakes higher and higher for awesome villains. And technically, some games you can play the bosses, but nearly all of them were not designed to be tournament legal. KOF95 is one exception. You can play as Saishu and Omega Rugal, both tournament legal, but the next game, KOF96, Chizuru and Goenitz are playable but ultimately far stronger than everyone else that they have to be banned. KOF97 lets you play all the bosses other than Orochi, but only the Orochi team is tournament legal, being designed from the ground up as alternate versions of the existing New Face team. Then lastly, KOF98 lets you play normal Rugal, toned down from his Omega Rugal counterpart. That's sadly where it ends, since KOF99 ended the streak of playable bosses, leaving only Kyo and Yuri as playable hidden characters. KOF2000 lets you play the mid-boss Kua, who would later become a staple character. However, all bosses from this point onwards are no longer selectable in the arcade releases, or even designed with tournament competition in mind. Well, except one game, sort of. KOF2002 Unlimited Match, a massive overhaul update to KOF 2002, is widely considered one of the best games in the series, hell, one of the best fighting games ever, and for good reason. A massive roster and perfectly refined gameplay with all sorts of new additions and nods to SNK thrown in, it's the quintessential KOF experience right next to KOF 98. It's hard to not love this game, even when Vanilla 2002 is in its own way just as fun. However, look, 02UM is fun and all, but you've seen enough K-Dash, Kasumi, Nameless, even Kula in the top 8s. You already know these characters are cracked and define the meta. You think those characters are overpowered? If you look all the way at the bottom of the character select screen, you'll notice a long row of outlier characters. And yep, these are the bosses up through the Ness saga, and to put it bluntly, they're incredibly busted, all 8 of them. You have the classic SNK villain himself, Geese Howard, and his EX form Nightmare Geese, classic KOF boss Omega Rugal, KOF 96 boss Leopold Goenitz, and from the Ness saga, KOF 99 boss Krizalid, KOF 2000 boss Clone Zero, KOF 2001 sub-boss True Zero, and 2001 final boss Igniz. Had Orochi Yuri been finished and not cut from the final game, that'd make for 9 bosses total, but 8 is still quite a lot. Of course, they're not at all tournament legal, but that doesn't stop Chinese players from playing boss-only sets from time to time. Sets that are so much fun to watch and play too, that I have to indulge in them and show you why these bosses make even those other top tiers I mentioned earlier look humble. Presentation-wise, It's the perfect excuse to bless your ears with not only their imposing but badass voice lines. But also to hear their godlike soundtracks too. Eight total bosses means they're effectively playing their own meta separate from the rest of the KOF2002UM roster, and once you see some of the ridiculous stuff they can do, it makes a lot of sense to have boss-only sets. So we'll work our way upwards and cover each boss one by one in terms of relative strength compared to the regular KOF2002UM meta. Quick side note, when playing against the bosses in training mode, they all have huge defense modifiers from their arcade mode counterparts, except Goenitz and normal Geese, but there's no way to turn this off. In player matches, however, they don't have this defense modifier. Originally, I thought it was always on, so make sure you're aware of this discrepancy in training mode too. This info isn't conveniently accessible in English, not to mention boss-only sets being an esoteric niche way of playing KOF2002UM, so keep in mind I might miss a few things. Thus, I'll only briefly cover each boss character and encourage you to lab them out yourself afterwards. And the boss we're starting with is one of my favorite SNK bosses. The guy himself who says "Koko desu ka?" and summons giant tornadoes to attack. The head of the Hakeshu is here to wreak havoc of his own as a hectic zoner. If you ever played him in either SVZ Chaos or even Vanilla 2002 on the PS2, he's pretty much comparable to both games. Tornadoes that reach the top of the screen that he can spawn anywhere in front of him, teleports, a Rekka slash attack, command grab super, and huge tornado HSDM to trap you inside. Unfortunately, he's pretty lacking here despite all that. He's got a new command normal on 4-day, which helps his damage and hit confirms a little, and against regular characters, his tornadoes, the bulk of his gameplay, does over 10% of health in one hit. So naturally, against the regular characters, he's very annoying despite his lack of combos. Annoying enough to warrant a ban. But that's where we already run into issues because you see, one mistake and Goenitz is dead. In a meta of only boss characters, Goenitz is only scratching these guys at best. His biggest selling point is ironically one of his hardest to use and makes him a one-trick pony. His supers are mostly invulnerable, but it helps a lot less than you'd think it would compared to later bosses. On the bright side, while often considered the weakest of the bosses, he's still usually rated as being high mid-tier at the minimum compared to the base roster by the Chinese KOF scene, generally speaking. Still, he's pretty crappy and the bosses have no issue mopping the floor with him. Is Geese any better then? The classic villain of Fatal Fury and boss of Southtown, Geese is of course represented here as one of the bosses. Similar to Goenitz, he plays very similarly to his SVZ Chaos and 2002 PS2 iterations, but not quite. He only has the Fireball type of Reppuken here, and his 4-B command normal isn't nearly as ridiculous as it is in those games. They even took away his cracked Raging Storm for the default vertical type that surrounds him. Even then, that's enough to set him apart from Goenitz, since he's got a pretty consistent toolkit to work with here. He's well-rounded, has solid combos, and fits the O2UM system quite well. His Raging Storm 2 might be the fastest Raging Storm Geese has ever had, coming out almost instantly. If you've seen him in really any other KOF game, there's not much else to say here. He plays the same, but quite strongly so, and could be argued he's on par with the top tiers in the base roster. Maybe not quite the same level as Nameless or K-Dash or other such characters, but still. By far he's much better than Goenitz and with invulnerable SDMs. However, they're both banned on the principle that they're bosses, even if you could theoretically argue for their tournament legality. That's only the first two bosses though, since Geese's other form is one hell of an upgrade. Geese's powered up form, Nightmare Geese, is also represented here as the real deal compared to normal Geese. First, as all KOF characters are fated to one day be blessed by the gods to bear their full power as fate demands it, he has a command grab, one similar to Yuri's command grab. And nothing crazy, until you realize his Repukens come out immediately and travel full screen at light speed, while also having Shippuken air fireballs that also flood the whole screen with a shower of projectiles, new supers with awkward inputs. He's called Nightmare Geese because his SDM is a reference to his Fatal Fury 3 hidden super input which gives you nightmares, and in general, his whole game plan revolving around his unmatched zoning. And lastly, yes, he has an infinite, and a pretty easy one at that too. He's a total menace once he pops it off. He has a pseudo loop with crouch C similar to Geese's infinite and SVC, but it's much harder to pull off here and requires you BC run to extend it. He can even do an infinite on crouching characters as a variant of the first one. Combine all of that with an overhead hitting, hard knockdown forward A command normal that lets him combo into Shippuken, and you have an actual nightmare on your hands. The one downside he has is his HSDM is the strange install super that when activated you have to land a counter in order for him to do the attack. But past that, it doesn't take much to figure out why he's arguably considered one of the strongest bosses in the game. The best zoners in the game, like Bao, couldn't hope to keep up with him, and even Nameless at most gets one super to fire projectiles with. But nothing these characters have can flood the entire screen to pose a threat. Enough of a threat that would give Omega Rugal a run for his money. The OG KOF boss is here, and if you've ever fought him, you already know how difficult he is to fight. He's not all that different here either, so if you've played him in other KOF games, regardless of which form, you already have an idea of what he's capable of here. That said, if you try to play Rugal the old-fashioned way, say doing his default light confirm combos with God Press, he's pretty unimpressive and limited. And his instant, full-screen Kaiser waves are amazing on paper for zoning, but they can actually backfire on him. More on that later. Still, we are talking about Mega Rugal here. He's got some pretty solid buttons, a solid jump CD, and the damage he puts out for the meter cost is quite strong. Then you have his other shenanigans like half circle back kick, giving him DP loops anywhere on the screen, which he can end on a super. Either God Press for the corner carry, or his grab super for the higher damage, which also has a massive hitbox by the way. His combos are gonna hurt like hell either way. If all else fails, you can throw out HSDM and knowledge check the opponent with a constant barrage of Kaiser waves, though you might be disappointed with the damage he does for 3 bars. Overall, a great character in terms of the bosses and can easily contend among the top 4 in a bosses only meta, with plenty of iframes to choose his way to victory. Although I do think ranking exactly how strong he is a bit tricky because the next boss is going to make even him look humble in comparison. We covered half the bosses already, but I need to illustrate something to you to help you better visualize just how overpowered these characters are. You have the O2UM roster, they're playing O2UM. Then you have the bosses, who by themselves are playing a separate meta from the rest of the roster in terms of strength. Nightmare, Geese, and Omega Rugal are one extra step higher than Goenitz and Geese as well. The Ness bosses, however, are playing a separate meta from the boss meta that's already playing a separate meta from the rest of the game. And then within the Ness meta, you have all 4 bosses playing their own game separate from everyone else. Don't believe me? Well, why don't we start off with Krizalid, my beloved. The Ness bosses have one big distinction with the rest of the roster right off the bat. Their CD attacks lead to a hard knockdown, both their standing and jumping CDs, and when a counter hits, they convert into counter wires, only adding to their already oppressively strong neutral and ability to convert into super. Krizalid's jump CD though, I mean okay, this is the same game with Kasumi Jump D in it, and even Krizalid's jump CD puts that to shame. Look at the sheer size of this hitbox. It doesn't matter, he can't cross up with it because he didn't skip leg day at all. In fact, a lot of Krizalid's normals are packing crazy hitboxes. Just throw out any button. He's probably hitting the opponent, especially his kick normals like standing B. The same goes for his fireball-esque attack, Typhon Rage, this huge swirl of wind in front of him that may as well say GG's I win neutral on top of building giant amounts of meter. Then you got his run-in hit grab, which gives him easy max mode loops and super confirms, fully invul SDM, screen nuke HSDM, and he's quite possibly one of the best bosses in the game. Albeit, you do want to use max mode combos with Krizalid to squeeze the most out of his damage. The other bosses, meanwhile, max mode is usually an afterthought since they already kill you off pretty easily without it. And I know I'm biased, but his combos in general are pretty fun to do too, having great use of max mode and DP loops of his own. He feels amazing here, and it's the closest I'll get to having a modern playable Krizalid in a KOF game. His peers are equally as threatening as he is, arguably even more threatening in different ways. The final boss of 2000, Clone Zero, is an interesting character, since from this point onwards, the boss's normals are on the weaker side and mainly there for show. Their lights have far-reaching hitboxes at least, and their CD normals are far from weak, though everything else is run-of-the-mill in terms of buttons. Thus, you'll have to play neutral with all 3 of them fairly differently compared to regular KOF, where you constantly rely on your normals. Clone Zero has some unique specials too, packing a fart of doom to say the least, and the damage of individual hits is on the weaker side. So how does he make up for it then? Some of the best quarter circle forward and DP attacks in the game, and a 1-bar super that hits anywhere on the screen, that is. Meanwhile, Krizalid's equivalent is his HSDM. So by themselves, they're huge, reflect projectiles, thus punishing reckless Kaiser waves from Omega Rugal despite their speed. They hit multiple times, come out fast, and are beautifully animated. They're also easy to combo into, and in case you haven't noticed by now, build entire bars of meter for him just by connecting with these attacks, and do so much guard damage that he's guaranteed to guard break you. The Ness bosses all have a pattern you'll see for the rest of this video, where, as you saw with Krizalid and Clone Zero, meter is a non-issue for them. They build it so easily that cashing out on it is not a detriment to them, no matter the use, thanks to their ability to get it right back from one simple interaction. And to top it all off, see this shadow attack Clone Zero has? He can mediate, it's unblockable, he's fully invulnerable during the entire animation, he can combo from it in max mode, it gives a hard knockdown, drags the opponent all the way to the corner, and best of all, he can loop it. Its only downside is the blind spot directly in front of him, despite what the hitbox says, but looping it is so easy that escaping this death loop is nigh impossible. The only counter back is the opponent uses their own fully invul attack back adds Clone Zero in order to escape, if that. It is a painfully slow death, figuratively and literally, but this attack, in my opinion, is heavily underrated with how cracked it is. Even Igniz can have issues escaping it, and that's just Clone Zero, one half of the equation. The character that Clone Zero is based off of, True Zero or just Zero, on the surface looks pretty basic. In a lot of ways he really is. Next to no practical combo potential, needs to play neutral with single strikes at all times, and has lackluster buttons outside of his CD attacks. So I don't blame you for immediately dismissing him when trying to lamp him out. If you ask me though, first of all, playing so much of his neutral involves summoning his strikers, making him play quite similarly to how he plays in KOF2001. And come on, that's kinda baller to have other people do all the dirty work for him right on the spot as he commands it instead of fighting himself. His quarter circle forward and DP motion special moves aren't anything new. They're pretty much the same as Clone Zero's same attacks, albeit still solid. You want to know what makes this guy really threatening? So okay, he can summon his lion, Glugon, and he comes slashing down onto the enemy quite fast, but this doesn't give Zero much to work with after the attack. It feels more defensive than anything, so it's seldom used, but by no means is it bad. But then you summon Ron, yes, that's Ron, the one Lin has been searching for. He spawns right where the opponent stands, and if he hits, instant hard knockdown. If they block though, instant guard crush, letting Zero immediately follow up on it. This effectively forces the opponent to have to act now just to avoid Ron. But then you add on top of that, Krizalid shows up, does a Typhon Rage, and what's already a powerful attack to him, Zero now also has access to, for which he can play both offense and defense, combo into super, anti-air with, meaty with Krizalid off any hard knockdown, and with said meaty, loop it repeatedly in the corner and keep the opponent trapped. Thus, turning what seems like a rather basic character into one you never want taking his turn against you. He's rated pretty favorably in China too, and I know someone will bring it up, Zero has an infinite, but good luck doing it in a real match. Plus, like Clone Zero, his damage isn't amazing. His HSDM is on the weaker side too, being hard to combo into, and with a tiny hitbox, but at least it looks cool. Although, not as cool as the last boss here. Finally, the leader of Igniz himself is playable here too, that being Igniz. In KOF2001, he's the final boss, and there, his theme song is titled I'm the Strongest. Here, it's titled Save the Universe. While two completely different themes, let it be known that titles are not lying. This guy is absolutely bonkers, and merely scratching you is enough for him to convert into a death combo. And no, he's not terribly hard to learn either. He's just as easy as most of the other bosses are. In fact, he might be the easiest boss to learn out of all the bosses here. Like the two Zeros, his normals are mediocre at best, but his CD attacks are a must in neutral with how strong they are. He's got some fireball attacks for strong zoning, a reflector to deflect them back, nothing too crazy there. His level 1 supers are mainly fancy ways of burning the bar of meter, with the added benefit of being invulnerable, plus his invulnerable God Press SDM. Then you try out his quarter circle forward attack and DP attacks, especially quarter circle forward C, all of which launch the opponent far away from Igniz or upwards. His quarter circle forward C by itself is an infinite, and this isn't some kind of hard to do tech either. It is quite literally an infinite that sets itself up on top of the fact that you already get insane amounts of meter just from landing it. Just do quarter circle forward C and it will loop. Mid-screen, it's possible to push yourself past the opponent where then you'll need to adjust your combo a bit, but otherwise, Igniz can convert damn near any hit into this attack, and it's safe, and his DP serving as an invulnerable reversal that lasts a massive amount of active frames too only further bolsters this attack. We're not finished though, because for some absolutely insane reason, he's allowed to freely cancel both his quarter circle forward and DP attacks into each other without max mode, and he can loop them into each other. Albeit, you have to do it super fast and you'll probably drop it by accidentally super canceling into a super, but the fact it's there at all shows Igniz is not screwing around, even in a dream match game. Assuming infinites are allowed, this is Igniz's entire game plan right here. Just do anything to get this attack to land, loop it until the opponent dies, or finish them off in style with a super. And yeah, if you hard knock down the opponent, you can easily combo into his HSDM. Fat chunk of damage for basically no work. Oh, and last but not least, quarter circle back kick gives him a free wall bounce. Because of course he has one. If all of that didn't convince you he's top 1, then I'm not sure what will. On that point though, but what exactly is the tier list or the meta really? Because honestly, I think you could make a case that a couple other bosses are top 1 instead. By briefly covering all 8 characters, I'm skimming on the details. These are by no means hard characters to learn, but do also keep in mind that as a result I'm overlooking a lot of the finer details. I also think the meta changes a little depending on whether you allow infinites or not. These are boss only sets though, so you're playing them for fun as is. Just ask whoever you're playing with whether they're cool with infinites or not. Tier list wise, there's no centralized tier list that agrees on what order the bosses go in, however. There's this video on Bilibili I found, but I have no idea of the actual credibility of it, so take it with a grain of salt. Still, you can safely assume that China probably doesn't allow infinites. It's universally agreed at least that Goenitz and Geese are the 2 weakest bosses by far. They play too much like normal characters to stand out and are pretty irrelevant overall. You'll sometimes see normal Geese picked, but when Nightmare Geese is right there, just pick Nightmare Geese. Speaking of, I know you're watching this and you're definitely thinking there's no way Igniz is in top 1 in the bosses meta. But even then, China does argue Nightmare Geese is in contention for the top spot with Igniz. When you consider his infinite and unmatched zoning potential, it's hard to set aside the possibility. I think there's a tiny amount of wiggle room to argue that Clone Zero could theoretically be top 1 too, with his Shadow attack being its own infinite and his solid screen nuke super, but it is stretching. Whatever the case, it's the KOF gameplay you love to see, but with a buffet of CD attacks, fluid animations, movements that almost makes you feel like you're watching an anime fight play out, and constantly being kept on your toes by the other player as you both fight for screen real estate. KOF, a game that expects the player to master the system and manage their meter very carefully, suddenly transforms into a game where meter is flipped on its head with how quickly you build it back up and interact with max mode. I really can't recommend watching Chinese sets enough and observing the wild nature of boss-only matches unfold. Every boss has their own bullshit up their sleeve that I guarantee you'll be clenching in your own seat at points. You may be asking yourself this whole video, this all sounds terribly broken and jank, who would play this ridiculousness? To that I say, you proved my point. You play these boss sets because you're a bit tired of the base game, and now you want to play as the freaks yourself. And it's 2002 UM. I mean, why not give yourself more excuses to play it? When even the bosses receive this much amount of love and attention to detail from the devs, it's worth trying them out yourself and labbing the bosses only meta. It's effectively like a second game you may have yet to fully explore and end friendships in. Now you, too, can enjoy this niche massacre. Now you, too, can enjoy this niche meta, and my name is Lich Massacre, telling you to go play KOF2002UM. Boss only matches or not.